As far as people that are in bands, you have like 10 songs you really like that you're really proud of? So then you're really just like kind of out there. Anybody, yell at me. What? Touring? Okay. So now that we're dealing with $5 gallons of gasoline, how can people effectively tour at that level?
I mean, I think it's going back to the early model of music. Now, everyone became a touring act in the last 5 years. It's amazing how many bands, like, we tour the country. That's what we do. Back when I was working in the clubs and the Vandals or Bad Religion would play, usually you guys would tour like with 1 or 2 bands at the most, and you'd have a lot of local bands play with you. Was that the way it used to be done? Or?
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember like when they might go out on their tours because they were the leaders of like our scene, but there was this local band scene. So I think playing, you need to develop locally again and develop a following locally. That's where we're going to go to. I mean, yeah, I was driving, talking to myself normally, like I do, and thinking about how the Warped Tour is going to change out next year. And I think in a lot of ways we're going to be less of the bands touring the whole way, and we're going to have more local stages and try to develop the local scene next year because we just can't bring the 4 stages. Just bringing 4 trucks on the Warped Tour is an extra $300,000. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But that's how I remember working the clubs. We'd have 3 or 4 bands open for you guys, and you'd go to the next city, and maybe some of them would play one day. But how many bands used to open for you? Did very many bands without big followings ever open for you? They just...
Yeah, all the time, yeah. I mean, the difference was back then you absolutely had to form a local following before you could tour out of your city. I mean, you couldn't possibly get booked out of your town if you didn't have some popularity locally, because that was probably your only chance of being known in other towns, because maybe, back then we had a kind of a network of what we used to call fanzines, and that took the place of what MySpace does today. The thing is with bands today, they can get 5 good songs, get them up on their MySpace page, get lots of friends. Next thing you know, they're popular in LA, Bakersfield, Lancaster, and Victorville, and they can go play all those places. They might not really be able to play LA, but they might be able to go play the Showcase Theater in Corona. You know what I'm saying? Like places where big bands don't go, if they start getting known on their MySpace page. So these bands start going to these places that aren't really urban centers to start getting gigs. We could never do that. You had to be pretty damn popular in LA for a club in San Francisco to let you come up there and play. But by the time that started happening for groups like Joey's and mine, then yes, that's what would happen. We would go up there and there would be, 4 opening bands, all local bands, and that would be their chance to get in front of people because a headliner from out of town was playing.
I mean, are you guys touring and just packages with everyone, or you're starting to go back to like local bands kind of opening with some nights? And
it happens once in a while. I do agree. I think that's actually, I never thought about that, but that's really cool because with MySpace getting all big, yeah, these are like the bands, like you start hearing their name all the time and you're like, who is this band? Like I hear them, like I know who they are, but I've never even heard their music.
I've heard of them, but I haven't heard them.
Yeah, and I'll see them in an alternative press, like on the cover. I think it's awesome, genuinely. Like I think that, I guess the next step would be, for you guys who want to tour, like my advice would be separate yourself. Would be to really make sure your songs are good before you start touring. And I'm sure your songs are good, but like the best you could do, you know what I mean? Because one thing that worked for my band, and if I'm just trying to give advice from like the limited amount of things that we've done right, I would say is that we were a local band forever, and played around LA clubs. Brett knew about us, I think, when we were like 16. We sent the demo to you too, but you never wrote back.
You and the White Stripes.
But and then if you were to come out, because these bands are writing good songs, a lot of these bands are writing good songs, and because there's certain magnetism and people are just hungry for music, so kids are drawn to them. But if you were to take the time to make the best thing ever and then put it on MySpace and then start playing local shows and then go on small tours, you could revolutionize this stuff because there's so much bad music.
Where do you live? So, I mean, one of the things we used to do is you'd find a band in Apple Valley and you'd find one in San Bernardino or something that kind of is like or someone, and you go out there and meet those guys, and maybe then you go open for them on a Saturday night out in their town. Then you go up to Apple Valley and you go open for that band, and you kind of rotate. That's where we're going to go back to, like those days of really grassroots network and marketing, because it is going to be too expensive for bands to just jump in a van and say we're going on the road for a year and play basement parties.
Yeah,
Right.
that's how Missouri was in the late '90s when we started doing bands and playing, you know, regionally, as we like to say, which is pretty much Missouri and Illinois. You meet these different bands, you network. There was a couple that like to keep themselves separate and trash talk everyone else, but no matter how different the bands were, everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's trying to do the same thing here. And the greatest thing is if you have this camaraderie in your region or your city or your town or whatever. Somebody does hit it big, they take that band regionally on tour. They help that band. It needs to go back to this local and regional networking kind of thing. I think.
I mean, if you want to really learn about it, I just got back from Alaska. They have the most amazing regional scene going on up there. Every weekend, bands are going around, and there's really this kind of scene I just experienced that I haven't seen in so many years, where they know they have to support each other, and they're working through it. And we went up there and found a couple bands who get to play the Warped Tour because they never have an opportunity to come down here. And it felt like back in like '82 LA, where everyone was kind of supporting. People were coming out, and even the other bands on stage, they're standing there watching each other. It was kind of a flashback.